Hey, welcome to the Commerce Hero Show. Today I'm joined by Dave Rodenbaugh. Dave, how the heck are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic, Kalen. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing good, man. Doing really good. I think that there's a whole bunch of stuff that you do, and it's hard to give an introduction. You've got your podcast, you've got recapture.io, but so we'll get into all that. But I think we first met when I went to Big Snow Tiny Conf, which is the conference. Do you call it a conference? Do you call it a mastermind? What do you call it?
I call it a business mastermind with skiing, which I think sort of covers like all the magic keywords that anybody would ever actually search for on that one. But yeah, it's a mixture, and that was a great first time that we had ever met. I think I'm trying to think if you and I had any paths cross at like microconf or anything like that. I don't know that we ever did.
No, I don't think we did. I might have seen you on Twitter, something like that. I know a lot of people that go to MicroConf, and I followed a lot of those podcasts for many years, but I've never actually been because the Magento conference is always like a week before or after,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
so that's always kind of been the snag there. But I feel like I'm unofficially part of that community a little bit.
Well, yeah, it seems like we have a lot of overlapping friends because as soon as after the conference, I was like, "Oh, do you know Kalen Jordan?" They're like, "Oh, yeah, he's this big Magento guy." I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah."
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely had a lot of overlapping friends from Big Snow Tiny Conf. But
Yeah.
yeah, that conference is super awesome. You actually attended the very first year.
Was that the very first one? Okay,
That was
because
the
there was
very
an
first one.
there's an East Coast one and a West Coast one, right?
And there's also a Europe one. They didn't hold it this
Okay.
year. There were some logistics hassles that Craig couldn't make happen. But I think he's planning on doing it again next year. Yeah, and it kind of like spurred like a little bit of a miniature conference movement. I know a bunch of people that are like trying to put together sort of either like Big Beach Tiny Conf or go to Martha's Vineyard Tiny Conf and just do all kinds
Nice.
of basically just get business nerds into a room, talk about your small web business and have fun somewhere, but connect with your tribe basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of excited to be part of all that.
Yeah, no, I really love that. So it's basically I think it was like 3 days, and
Hmm.
then we'd go skiing, snowboarding during the day, and then in the evening or in the afternoon we'd sit down, talk about our businesses. People would present on different topics and things like that, and I was like, this is fantastic. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
there's this tension about the number of people that attend there. I would love to like have more, but that small number is like it's absolutely perfect. In 2 days you can get through 6 presentations a day because you give roughly 45 minutes and some transition time. So that's like 6 hours of presentations. I mean, that's kind of intense, to go through that,
yeah.
especially if like, half of them are masterminds or whatever, and somebody presents a question. But at the same time, you would love to just have more time of that and more people and more stuff. And so, yeah, that's the thing that's always tough about that. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
come in next year?
I probably should. It's funny because I have a buddy. I've been wanting to go. I haven't gone snowboarding since then. I've been wanting to, and I have a buddy up in Boulder that I might want to try to visit next in the winter. Is it in February again?
It's probably going to be in February. We haven't nailed down dates yet, but
Okay.
everybody from Texas comes up to ski in Colorado. So now it's a
Yeah.
cultural thing for you. Like you have to do it now.
I just have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only thing is I think I might because I want to get up there sooner than later, so I might try to make it up there in like November or December or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's the only snag. Is it okay? Is the skiing okay up in around then, November, December, or is
It totally depends on what the weather patterns are like. I mean, sometimes we've had like so much snow in November that they open, a lot of ski areas don't open until Thanksgiving ish because that's sort of the first big set of holidays where people would take off a few days and go and rent a condo and stay up there and stuff. And, people from the local Denver area will drive up. But, Thanksgiving can either suck or be awesome. And there's pretty much no in between on that, sadly.
okay?
So you just never know. And the same is true with Christmas. Like last year, we were thinking that Christmas was also going to suck because we had nothing in December, absolutely nothing. Christmas Eve, a foot of snow in the mountains. It was
Wow.
like a perfect Christmas present. Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, you can't depend on that. So, I mean, you can bet that the ski resorts were filling their drawers on December 23rd because that's like their big time right there between Christmas and New Year's. All the rates are the highest. All the lift tickets
Right.
have the biggest blackout dates and the most expensive prices and everything. Like they expect this whole place to be packed.
Right.
And if there's no snow, they're screwed.
Yeah, it's not good.
Not good.
So I heard this question, I think, on some other podcast, and I was like, oh, I think it was the one that Matt Stauffer does, Laravel one. Anyway, the question was, what do you tell people that you do if you meet somebody in like the grocery store, something like that? And they say, what do you do? You've got all these things that you do, right? Podcast,
uh,
bootstrapping. What do you?
you know, I honestly hate that question. I really do because there's no I can't just give a single answer that's going to satisfy everybody. So instead, what I do is I kind of give a smart ass answer and then I see where it leads. So I always say I'm a professional computer geek.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And
That's
I
really
just throw
good.
that out there. I stop with that. And if they're like, oh, you're a computer person, we're done.
We're
We're just
done.
not going to talk
Yeah.
about that. So, how about them Rockies or Broncos or any other sports team you want to talk about? It's sort of like this great question that filters them out. Like they're either a computer nerd or they're not a computer nerd. And if they are a computer nerd, then we can go a little bit deeper. Oh, well, what do you work on? Do you work on what kind of software are you into? And then
Yeah.
I'll say, oh, well, I work on a lot of enterprise Java for my consulting, or I do other stuff for my web business with Node.js and MongoDB or whatever. So we can very much change the conversation tone at that point. Or sometimes they may be like, oh, okay, well, business, you run some business, you do consulting. Oh, what is
Yeah.
that like? You kind of twist and turn to figure out where it ends up going. But yeah, I don't have a better answer than that these days.
Yeah. I usually say something boring like, I'm into software development, and then I just keep it short. And then similar thing, you see if they're in this space, then you get more into detail. And if not, they
Yeah.
they say, "Oh, I need to have a website built. Can you help with that?"
Yeah, here's Wix.com. Good luck with that.
Yeah. It's actually kind of nice to be able to point people to Wix and Squarespace. Like I've had a couple times where I was like, no, seriously, like Squarespace is perfect. Like it's perfect for you. Costs, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks a month. Go check it out. It's a lot better than just saying like, no, I can't help you.
Right, right. Or here, try install WordPress and good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 no, that's a much better answer. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I get the questionnaires, you're filling out paperwork for a bank or whatever. What do they ask you to list your profession as? And I don't put professional computer geek at that point because that just raises eyebrows, and you don't want to piss off bankers, right?
right.
So I put down, something very bland and boring. I'm like, oh, software engineer. I'm just a software engineer. There's a
Yeah,
million software engineers, so that's a totally common
yeah.
stable, normal profession. It doesn't raise any eyebrows. It doesn't get anybody upset. Nobody's knickers are in a twist. So
Right. It's somewhat impressive, kind of boring. It's not going to raise any flags
yeah,
at the bank. You're not going to get any special review.
right,
Um,
right.
nice. So okay, so the more in-depth version of everything that you do, we've talked a little bit about some of the things, but if you could list them all out, the podcast, the businesses,
Sure.
line them all
Um,
up.
well, we talked about Big Snow Tiny Comp. So I founded that a while ago. The original guys that did that one were Brian Castle and Brad Tanar. They do the East one, and I basically approached them and said, "Hey, would you like me to run the one in the West?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure. Can you invite us too?" Okay, great. So that's where that came from. But I also do the Rogue Startups podcast with Craig Hewitt, who runs a couple of things. He runs Podcast Motor and Sales Camp. And then he has this podcast hosting service called Castos. And we just talk about our businesses, like you and Phil kind of talk about a variety of things on Mage Talk, what's going on in the Magento community. And we sort of do a different flavor of that. But, we talk about what's going on in the bootstrapping community. We talk about things that we're struggling with in our businesses. We talk, we bring guests on and we talk about, what things that they've worked through. Like we had Patrick Campbell from Price Intelligently on, and we had him talk about like SaaS pricing strategies and things like that, which was a great discussion.
Yeah.
So we totally selfishly started that podcast to be able to reach out and talk to people that we thought were interesting, or just talk about things, kind of like a mastermind on the air sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that now for 2-3 years. I want to say we started 2015 or 2016. I don't remember. We're like 136 episodes in or something like that. So
Yeah. I'm sort of
we,
I'm a little bit sorry, I didn't mean to, I'm a little jealous because when I started Mage Talk, oh, and by the way, Dan Kelly in the chat says woohoo rogue startups. Looks like you got
woo,
some fans.
represent. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Um when we started Mage Talk, I was doing Magento every day, and so it was a similar thing. It was just selfishly talking with somebody about what I was doing day to day. And then the past, I don't know, year and a half, I've really have not been doing Magento development myself, and I'm probably more interested in the bootstrapping, side of things. And so I'm kind of jealous that, you get to just kind of focus on that with your podcast. And actually one of the cool things with this Conversator podcast is I kind of want to broaden out a little bit and, talk to other bootstrappers and things like that, and just broaden out because it's a fun area to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously been super interested in doing this for a long time. So back in like 2009, so I guess this is the next thing that I do. I joined this community called the Micropreneur Academy, which is now Founder Cafe. And this ended up like being the gestation of MicroConf,
Yeah.
the conference for small businesses and single founder startups. And this kind of came out of the Startups for the Rest of Us podcast. It was an idea that Rob Walling and Mike Tabor had, and then they brought it to the community, and we're all like, hell yeah, bring it on. We love this. And I had no idea that these were the people I was searching for. But anyway, so when I was joining this community, I started doing a lot of other people had some particular idea they wanted to build, like you built Mage Mail, and there were other guys like this was when Ruben Gomez of BidSketch was actually in the academy at the same time that I was. He was just starting BidSketch, so I got to watch that grow in the early days.
Wow.
That was super cool.
Yeah.
But we would all talk about what we were building and working on, but I didn't have something to build or work on at the time, and I was kind of jealous. But then I talked to Rob, and he was like, yeah, have you ever heard of Flippa? And I'm like, what? And so he was the one who sort of introduced me to the concept of buying and selling websites.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out and I jumped in and I actually bought this really crappy online cron service, like, what you would expect a cron job to do on a Unix box. This did off of a website. And I was like, why the hell would people buy this? And it turns out that there was like a ton of hosting services that didn't provide cron.
That's so
So
funny.
I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be my business. I'm going to do as good as Ruben with BidSketch. We're going to be making bank, man. And oh god, it was a disaster. I got 3 months into it, and I was scratching to make $100 a month. And yeah, it was totally embarrassing. But there were a lot of good things that came out of it. Like one, I learned how to rehabilitate a business. I learned about the process of buying websites. I learned about the risks. I learned about stupid business models. And then I ended up going and acquiring a WordPress plugin. And that was the very first thing that I got. And the woman that had run this, she actually was also doing a WordPress theme business, but she just didn't know how to like run an online business and do basic things like set up a shopping cart or have a forum for technical support or not do customer support responses in post comments on a WordPress blog. It was like, she was kind of drowning in this thing. She just didn't know where to go with it. And I'm like, I think I can fix all that. And so I acquired it, and I actually turned it from making this small amount of money, and I like 10x'd it. It wasn't like quit my job kind of money, but it was very encouraging, and it gave me sort of the confidence to go out and like go to the next thing. So she later ended up having a different WordPress plugin that I acquired. And I ended up doing the same thing because she had made the same mistakes again, but just with a different plugin. And I was like, I got this. I'll totally take it off your hands. How much do you want for it? I didn't even ask her any specifics. I'm like, just tell me the price. Shut up and take my money.
Right.
So that worked out really well. And then I started doing more process automation and stuff like that, and bringing other people in, hiring developers. It adds overhead, but it was still profitable, and it still is today. But again, it wasn't like the thing that moved the needle that kind of completely got me out of freelancing, which was really my goal of starting the businesses here. So in December 2016, I acquired Recapture, and
Hey,
I had been looking for quite a while for a SaaS with recurring revenue that had sort of a lower overhead than what I had been working with in WordPress. So, that's like 7 years in WordPress stuff there. And I
when
had
you
bought and
when you say
sold other
lower
websites.
when you say lower overhead, you just mean less like development maintenance overhead?
Well, I just mean more profitable in general. Like your profit margins on a SaaS, I've noticed tend to be considerably higher than what you
Right.
get in WordPress. Because, with WordPress, I have to hire developers, I've got to hire support, and I'm not pulling in enough revenue to sort of get like a 50% margin off of that stuff, which
Yeah.
is a lot easier when you have higher price points in SaaS. So this is a lot about pricing and price points. We sell a product that costs $200 one time, and then there's an annual maintenance fee that goes with that
Yeah.
we get maybe 20 to 50% of them renewing on it. So it's not, and that's per year. So $100 a year versus $50 a month, that's a huge difference in terms of the revenue that you get to work with and the kind of people that you can hire and the profit
Yeah.
margin that you can reinvest into paid marketing and stuff like that. Like I ran some experiments with WordPress, and I had to really limit the size of the experiment because I just didn't have a huge budget to go with.
Hmm.
So that was one of the
It's
reasons I moved up.
It's interesting, like even in the Magento community, there was this sort of wave in the early days, a lot of people that built extensions and did really well, and they just put the extension up on the marketplace, and the thing would sell like hotcakes. There wasn't a lot of like fraud and stealing and stuff like that. And then by the time I got in, which was a few years after that, I was like, I initially built it as a regular extension, and then I quickly moved it to SaaS. And they've done a lot of things to try and improve upon quality and improve the extension marketplace and things like that. But I kind of feel like everybody should just be building SaaS from from the perspective of not necessarily always is that the best way to build every piece of functionality. No, but from the perspective of the developer, the business owner, like the margins are better, everything's better, right? With SaaS. So part of me feels like, which of course with marketplaces like Shopify, because of the nature of the system, every plugin is SaaS. So that's just how it is. But part of me
Well,
feels
sort of,
like,
not really. There are some non-SaaS ones in there.
oh really?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
very much like Magento. I haven't done like a total survey to see which ones are
but
SaaS
they're all
versus
hosted.
non-SaaS.
But they're all host like any Shopify extension is like hosted. Like it's
I mean, it's no more hosted than a Magento extension that like does. So, there are lots of extensions out there. So you're most familiar with MageMail. So I'll give an abandoned cart example. So there were plenty of abandoned cart extensions in Magento that just did the very simple thing. They installed in your store and they just sent out the emails, right?
right.
Pretty basic stuff. That kind of stuff still exists in Shopify too. They don't need a whole SaaS to do that, but it's running on Shopify's platform as opposed to your Magento server. So, but it's
But if
still not
there's
SaaS.
But it, if it's a like, what's an example of one of the ones that does that?
I'm trying to think of there, so Beaconing has one, and
Okay,
it's called Sales Pop. It's free, and it's just something that installs on the Shopify store, and it puts email pop-ups. It's configurable. Well, actually, that's not, no, because Beaconing's a full SaaS, so that's a bad example.
yeah, I can't think of any that wouldn't
Yeah,
be like, maybe it would be a free SaaS, but it'd still be SaaS in the sense that you'd go to website.com to manage all of your settings for that extension, because they like Shopify doesn't have like a place where you install an extension in the code base like Magento or WordPress.
it's different, but it's not that different. I mean, there is an install section, and it's like, you've got the Magento admin panel where you manage your extensions inside of there, and you have kind of a similar place in Shopify. It's just where the code actually lives at that point.
Yeah. I'm just
Yeah,
saying all the code lives outside of there's
it
no code
does.
that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
But I
anyway,
will
so
say that Shopify seems more SaaS heavy than Magento does. Like
mhm.
there's just more SaaS businesses that have kind of gotten into the store, and I don't know if that's the marketplace has matured where everybody's like SaaS, rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
Or it's like that was the natural model, or they just learn from others by looking at BigCommerce and Magento and going, oh, well, that one-time stuff. Maybe if we just go for like SaaS business models, that's better. But,
Yeah.
I haven't done like an extensive, exhaustive review of that. But, SaaS definitely has better margins. When you have recurring revenue, your customers are more likely to talk to you. They're less likely to, give you ongoing support because it's installed and working. And if it's doing its job, they kind of leave you
Yeah.
alone. And if
Yeah.
it's broken, they vote with their dollars and they're out of there. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just a better business model in general to work with. So
That's yeah, and that was sort of my point is that it's just a better business model, and it kind of feels like everybody should move to that. Like everybody that's doing deployed extensions should just move to SaaS. Um,
yeah, I can't argue with that. But if like you're talking about new people into the space, SaaS is really hard. Like getting everything done and making it all, fixing your onboarding and setting up the infrastructure and having your hosting right. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of overhead. And for somebody brand new to the whole thing, I think they might fuck it up. I know
yeah,
they
no.
will fuck it up. That's,
No, I mean if you're yeah, I agree. I would say that in if it might make sense to do a deployed extension from the perspective of you're just learning and you want something with you want to have less variables to worry about. You don't want to worry about hosting and infrastructure. From that perspective, I'd agree. It might make sense when you're just starting out, but for somebody that's has a bunch of them under their belt that's been doing it for a while,
oh
I
yeah,
can't see any. And,
totally.
and yeah, it's definitely a different skill set to figure out all of those hosting issues. And you could say that maybe that's harder, but it's pretty hard to support deployed extensions too. You're supporting different versions. You got to troubleshoot issues with the customer. You don't have access to their site. I mean, it can be quite a hassle.
Just getting started I don't know if you're familiar with Rob Walling's stair stepping method, where he
Yeah,
sort of yeah, so he sort of talks about starting with something small like an ebook or something like that, and then move up to like maybe a Shopify app or a Magento extension or a WordPress plugin or something like
yeah,
that, and
yeah,
then move up to SaaS. Like you kind of ratchet it up slowly so that
yeah,
you start working the sales angle and the marketing angle and the support angle, because all of these things, we as developers are not necessarily just natively awesome at, like we are at slinging code and making UIs and deploying stuff. I think most of us would say we'd probably be more comfortable doing or learning like an AWS deployment than we would be setting up a marketing campaign
yeah,
or doing
yeah,
cold sales calls, right? And all of that's super important when you're starting a business. And it's not just the development aspect, but I think in my experience, I've seen a lot of people that are just sort of hiding in the code. They're like, oh, well, this is the piece I really like and I'm good at. I know these things are important too, but I'm gonna stay over here because this is my wheelhouse, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so, what do you think about the Magento community? You've been relatively recent into it with your acquisition of Recapture, and so what are you thinking of it so far?
The Magento community as a whole seems very open and welcoming. I started following a bunch of people on Twitter as soon as I got Recapture, and I just started talking to other vendors. I talked to people that have a bunch of stores on there. There are lots of things that I really like about the community, especially the Magento. Uh, what am I trying to say here? The folks at Magento themselves, like I think that they've made some huge leaps and strides in the last 12 months, really upping their game, like getting serious about Magento 2 and making their app deployments a lot faster out there. Like I remember my very first one trying to push some changes, some really minor changes out into the app store for Magento, the marketplace. Well, back then it was Connect, but just trying to get some stuff onto Connect took
Mhm.
6 weeks. And then the last time I did it, it was like a couple of weeks. And then the very last time that I did it was literally instantaneous because they were like, "Oh, it's just a bug patch. Boom, done. Here we go, live." And I was like,
Nice.
"Wow, that's great." I mean, to see a community like respond, because I had said something to him. I'm like, "Hey, 6 weeks is a little long here. This is not agile development. I can't provide value to my customers if I have to wait 6 weeks for you guys to shove this out here. I have to do manual updates. That sucks. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to see that happening in there. You know, like any community, there's always turmoil in there. I've been a member of the WordPress community for a lot of years, and there's been turmoil over major version updates and now Gutenberg and how Automatic's role is changing on there. And now we're seeing kind of the same stuff going on with Magento. Hey, look, we're being acquired by Adobe now, and open questions on that. But what's awesome is that, there's a lot of really smart, really great people in the community. And I think that's going to anchor it no matter what kind of turmoil is happening out there. You've got awesome people like the community manager, Sherry Rohde. You've got other awesome people in the community like Karen Baker of Shipper HQ. So I finally got to connect with her at Shopify Unite this year and sat down and had a great conversation with her. She and I had exchanges back and forth on Twitter, but she is so awesome to talk to in person. And then on top of all that,
Yeah.
she did that great write-up on here's what the whole Adobe Magento acquisition means, and here's why I think Shopify has a long way to go. And I learned a ton from all of that because I didn't see her 10-year insider perspective on just all of the things that Magento was capable of. I'm surfacing a little bit of that stuff, but I just don't have the deep experience that guys like you or others that are doing system integrations with Magento. So, I'm loving being part of the community, just learning all this stuff and interacting with these really great people. And I get to
Nice,
hang
man.
with guys like you, man. I haven't had a
Nice.
chance to meet Phil yet, though. Keep hearing about his hair all the time.
Yes, yeah, we do. We do love to talk about his hair.
Yes.
How actually I'm curious about the Gutenberg thing because I had seen something about that. Is that the new version of the editor for WordPress? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so Gutenberg is kind of WordPress's response to all the Squarespace, Wix website builders, as well as like a number of
Gotcha.
page builders that came up in WordPress. So there was like Beaver Builder, and I'm trying to think of like some of the other ones. They're kind of fallen by the wayside as Beaver Builder ascends because they were like the best written one with the least amount of hassle and the most compatibility. But anyway, it was basically just a lot of people were thinking, you know, WordPress is cool. It's free. It's hosted on everywhere. It runs 28% of the internet. All of this is awesome. But man, it's kind of a pain in the ass to make a website. And there's all these things just are so 2000 notions, the whole authoring the HTML directly. And can I just drag and drop? I just want to move the
Mhm.
stuff around and build these things in my page. And I felt the same struggles. Like, I have the web development skills, but going in there and doing that stuff is still a major pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And I've used WordPress to build lots of websites, and it does a good job, but it's just a lot of work to get there. And so Gutenberg was kind of the response to all of the competitors that have been building these drag and drop website editors and trying to get, the lower end, less technical side of the market involved in building websites. And rightly so. I think WordPress needs to do something about this. But it's kind of funny because, you know, I don't know how much you know about the WordPress community and
A little bit. Not
Matt. So, Matt, the guy that runs Automatic and the founder of WordPress, he's very much a benevolent dictator. And it's a top-down kind of thing, but he always talks about getting the community involved. But it's, whatever ends up going into WordPress is what he agrees with the community on. So if
okay.
there's something that the community is really into and he's like, then it kind of just chunks along and doesn't exactly get injected into the mainstream quite as soon as you would want. And Gutenberg kind of was one of those things where he turned around and sort of forced it on the community and said, we're going to do this now. And they were all like, what? And
Gotcha.
as a result, everybody scrambled to try to get this stuff in. And then everybody realized there were like major UX, UI problems. And this is the whole time that WordPress was also saying, oh, hey, better start learning JavaScript. Hey, we might be going to React. Like he's making all these sort of weird side signals. And everybody that's doing just straight PHP and HTML and CSS, they're like, so what are we doing here? I mean, we don't really get it. So Gutenberg has caused this huge amount of confusion. And then when they released it, it kind of wasn't ready for prime time.
Okay.
And now they're still saying, okay, well, we're going to put it into WordPress 5.0, and we're kind of inching there slowly. It was going to be in like 4.5, I think. And then they nixed that after they did the beta of it. The beta testers were like, this is terrible. This
Yeah.
does all these weird things and it has all this undefined behavior. Nobody really supports this. What the hell are you thinking? And then he kind of relented and was like, all right, we'll bail on that. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Gutenberg is kind of I guess the closest analogy in the Magento thing would be like Magento 2. Like, you know, they did a major split of the code base, rewrote all the APIs, everything's new and different. And it just took a long time for everybody to kind of get on with the program and decide, you know, when is it appropriate for me to rewrite and move up?
Mhm.
How, you know, is it going to be a big deal? Is it something that's worth the investment? Yada, yada. What's the other stuff look like? And WordPress is having the same kind of struggle right now. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, that's interesting. So how do you like how would you compare the WordPress community and the Magento community?
oh, you know, they're very different. They're very different. Um, yeah. So the Magento community seems to be more rallying around a common cause and a common goal. Like when everybody's making money in e-commerce, like it's a pretty clear defined direction everybody should be going. Like you can tell whether you're doing the right thing or not, because does this help stores make money or not help stores make money? Okay, well, it's clear which direction I want to be heading here.
Mhm.
With WordPress, you don't have that clarity as
'Cause there's a
much.
much broader set of users and use cases and stuff like that?
Yeah, so you started out with bloggers, then there were people that were building websites. Now you've got just running general stuff across the internet, and you got this popularity thing going on. Plus, there's all these people that came into WordPress, and some of them were like the hardcore community people where they're going to WordCamps and it's all about diversity and inclusion and, building stuff together and having these common social goals. And then there's a group of people that are like, well, we're trying to commercialize the WordPress space because this thing is providing us a living. So these are the agencies and the plugin developers and the theme developers. And, there's a lot of tension between those two groups. And then you have the general users on top of that, where they're like, I just want my shit to work.
Mhm. That's
Make
what
it work.
all the users across the board, they could care less about all the internal drama and stuff. They're just make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of the drama that gets churned up about, people in the community that are doing bad things, and that gets posted across things, and there's big forum discussions, and then there's like rewriting the terms of service or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of community turmoil that goes on in that. um, and because the WordPress developers that are trying to make a living out of this are kind of at odds with Matt and his whole idea of open source and everybody should be doing this for free, and Automatic is this benevolent nonprofit organization, but we're totally in control of WordPress and we're actually monetizing it, but we're not going to let you monetize it in the same way. There's a lot of weird artificial tensions. I don't see those things in the Magento community. Like everybody's kind of focused on one goal, getting forward. There's crazy drama that's going on, M1 versus M2, the Adobe acquisition. But in that sense, there's still very much, there's maybe more of a split between like community and enterprise, where you've got the folks that are making big bucks on this and the ones that are directly connected to the guys that got acquired by Adobe. Plus, then there's the rest of us that are all building extensions for the general population, but still contributing tons of code back to the main code base. Yeah, so I mean, they're very different in a lot of ways, I would say. But I
Yeah,
think both of them have very strong, vocal, interested communities. And, in a sense, I would say not having the dictator at the top for Magento has been very beneficial, because at
that's
least
interesting.
I would say that the community voices get more of a vote that way than with WordPress, where it's like, I either like the community and what they're saying or I don't. And then
Yeah.
we'll put it in that based on that. So that's very much the dictatorship can hurt things, I think, quite a bit, because
Gotcha.
Gutenberg should have been done earlier, but Matt's reluctance or hesitance to go that direction kind of stifled that whole thing and put WordPress behind the times, in my opinion.
Gotcha. It's interesting you say that because I generally feel like I wish that because essentially Matt, I mean, he's the creator, Matt Mullenweg, the creator of WordPress. So it's essentially a founder-led company, whereas Magento was, the original founders, Roy and Yoav, left the company, several years back. And I think some great things are happening. I think it's doing great. But I feel like founder-led companies generally do better, right? You look at Facebook, you look at all, like a lot of the most successful companies. There's something about, Apple with Steve Jobs, like there's something about a company that's founder led, where the founder is really the product
No,
person.
no.
And
Sorry, yeah, my daughter just walked in, had no idea I was doing this thing here.
no worries. Yeah, like so and it's funny because I'm actually doing a podcast tomorrow with Yoav, the original co-founder, and he's with another company now that sort of competes with Magento. So it's gonna be very interesting. But
Yeah.
I sort of long for that in a way, but it's also interesting. I can see how, despite the fact that that founder could have a really strong and positive influence, as the community member, you'd have less of a voice.
I think it's a mixed bag, right? So, there are certain strong founders that definitely carried it a long way, but we can definitely show founders where they got in the way, right? So let's take Facebook, I think has done pretty well under Zuck. And, we could probably say the same thing about Elon Musk with Tesla and SpaceX
Right.
so far.
Right.
But then there's guys like Bill Gates, where they did really well for a good solid decade, and then all of a sudden the internet just smacked them right in the face, and they were like, nah, we're going to build msn.com and you're all going to join our little network over here, kind of
Yeah,
like
that's true.
AOL. And we're all like, no, we're not doing that. And so they
Yeah.
had to kind of retool their whole strategy. They had the whole Blackbird project, and then eventually acquired the browsers, which eventually came IE. I mean, they were not clued in by any stretch of the imagination as to where the right direction was to go. Now, in Bill Gates' defense, I think they still managed to do some pretty smart things in the late 90s. But then they kind of lost their way. Like, we pretty much have the
Yeah,
last
it's true.
20 years of Microsoft where it was lost years for them. And,
Yeah.
under Satya, they're doing a little bit better, but they still got a lot of catch up here. So the
Yeah.
founder led movement makes a difference if the founder has a clear vision. But if that
I
founder,
agree. I think in the case of Microsoft, like I feel like what happened there was a fundamental change in the dynamics of the industry where the internet came along. Microsoft was doing great pre-internet, putting out PCs, putting
oh
out
yeah,
software, that kind of a thing. And so if the internet wouldn't have come along, I feel like I feel like that's the main exception to where the founder-led company might falter, is where there's a fundamental change to the industry, and if they just don't get it, like that's probably going to happen with AI. Like there's probably going to be certain companies,
yeah.
great founder-led companies, that if they don't get AI 10 years from now, it's just going to completely. But there has to be something really, I think, fundamental to throw them off course.
Yeah, I mean, another example is Apple, right? Now that Steve is gone, he had a plan for a long time, and Tim could execute to that plan. But now we're kind of seeing the end of that plan, and it
It's just
doesn't feel.
downhill. It's
It's
downhill.
downhill, yeah,
Yeah,
and it doesn't feel like they have the same spark. It doesn't feel like the same innovative things are coming out of it. The
exactly.
quality has gone down. So, I mean, the founder-led thing, if there's a strong vision and a strong ability to execute, I think they do some pretty amazing things. But if you lose that founder, or you lose that vision, or you run out of that vision, or your ability to execute gets screwed, or there's a major disruption, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can happen.
Yeah,
It's tough.
yeah.
Business scene is tough.
Business things tough. Speaking of founders, I was looking at your Twitter thread, and I think you did a podcast recently with Rob Walling.
Yeah.
And I followed startups when I was building Mage Mail, and I was in that kind of bootstrapping phase. I was following Bootstrap with Kids. I was following Startups for the Rest of Us and a couple of others. And those were like, I've never met Rob. I think I may have exchanged a couple of emails with him, but haven't been to MicroConf. But like that podcast, those set of podcasts, I feel like sustained me through that, crazy phase. And so
Yeah.
it's
That
been
you are
wild
not
to see.
alone.
Yeah.
There's
No,
somebody else out in the void doing the same crazy thing you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been wild to see the success they've had with Drip, with the acquisition by Lead Pages,
Yeah.
Lead
Lead
Pages,
pages. Yeah.
and then also didn't his co-founder recently create Level.app? Was that somebody that was involved with
No, I
Drip?
don't know if it was level.app. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, you're talking about Derek Reimer.
Yeah, is he the one that?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So they're doing, so he's working with, you remember Ben Orenstein?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because he came to Big Snow Tiny
He
Conf
was
that
at
first
the
year.
Big Snow Tiny Home. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he's working with Derek. They're doing a podcast, and I think they're working on stuff together. I want to say that Ben is rewriting Screen Hero and calling that tuple.app, and Derek is working on like a better chat to replace the distractive Slack
Yeah.
called level.app, I want to say. So,
Yeah, yeah. But
uh,
anyways, I was curious, how did that podcast episode go with Rob?
oh, it was really good. So Rob also did a talk when he was at MicroConf this year, kind of talking about. So now he's had sort of the full experience of business in terms of he's done it bootstrapping, he's bought, he's built, he's had funding, he's had acquisition, and he's built a large team, and he's worked with an acquiring company, and he's built the whole team on his own. Like he has a kind of a unique perspective now, and he was reflecting on, what were the things that he really liked about working for Lead Pages, and what were the things that were kind of a struggle to him, and what were the things that he kind of got his eyes opened up to. They definitely gave him resources that, had he not had those resources, Drip would have never gone to where it is now. But at the same time, it was no longer the, you know oh, well, I want to add feature X, I've talked to the customers, they love feature X, I'm just going to build feature X now. He couldn't do that anymore. He had to go sell it to management. He had to talk to customer support. He had to bring it to the marketing team. Like, here's why you want to talk about it. So he spent more time building slide decks than he did building features.
Yeah.
And he's like, that sucked. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's enterprise development for you. So that's
And
that's
he
the way it
was
goes.
he was what was the structure of that? He was still on board. Is he still on board? Has he
No,
since left?
no, he left. He left. I think he ended up leaving in May or June or something like that. No, it had to be May because he was gone. Maybe it was April. I think he was gone by the time it was MicroConf because he put unemployed as his little company on his badge.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so he's been out for a little while, as has Derek. So,
Yeah.
they did their thing there. They got to their vesting period, and they're like, yeah, it's time for us to move on because
Yeah.
this is not our long-term happy place. They did good
Right.
things, but it was time to do something else.
Yeah. It's funny because did you ever read the book Start Small, Stay Small? I think
I even
uh
have an autographed copy.
nice. I remember reading that. I think I was on a flight or something, and I'd been following a bunch of his stuff, and I read that book, and it was so inspiring to me because for some reason fit my personality. The idea of the book is you don't have to try to get big. You don't have to try to get funding.
Right.
You can start small, you can stay small, and I've sort of continued to follow that mantra. I haven't really done a great job of building a team and things like that. I think about the acquisition of Mage Mail, and I'm like, it can be bittersweet thinking back on it if you made the right decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I'm looking at him and I'm like, he didn't stay small, man. Like Drip is huge. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean, he did. You could say he didn't follow his own advice, but he also did this multiple times, right?
yeah,
So it wasn't just Drip. He actually had, I don't know if you've heard all of his story, but he did like this goofy thing online called justbeachtowels.com. He bought it off of
oh, I
Flippa,
think I
acquired it,
remember that. Yeah, yeah, I
did
remember that.
fixed it, got a drop shipper on it. It wasn't like churning out 5 figures a month or anything like that, but it was doing okay.
Yeah,
And then he ended up getting Hittail and revamped that and sold that. So that still wasn't like, getting super huge. But each time he's like, alrighty, I'm ready to move to the next level. And I think some people want to move to the next level, but I am totally like you. I'm like, it's all about the lifestyle for me. I want something that can allow me to live the life that I want to live. I don't need to be bigger than that. If it gets bigger than that, that's okay. If it doesn't, that's totally fine too. But it's not my goal to get there necessarily. And and maybe that goal could change. Like maybe someday I could say, you know what? I just want to swing for the fences on this one and see where I can take this, because that's interesting to me all of a sudden. But right now, with my kids and my life and things that are going on, it's not interesting to me. I just want something that supports me and allows me to be a family guy. I'm happy
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the process of acquiring a recapture and a little bit about recapture.
Okay, sure. So, if we're going to talk about acquiring recapture, we actually have to go back to about July of 2015. Really, February of 2015. That's kind of when I started this whole process. So, I engaged with FE International, who you are familiar with, of course, and talked to Thomas and David over there about just acquiring a business. And so in February, I was kind of starting to get serious. But July, I was like, okay, I really want to find a SaaS business because I've got this WordPress stuff. It's doing okay, but I really want to take it to the next level and get something that gets me out of freelancing. That was my goal. I want to shut off freelancing. I want to run a SaaS, and that's it. And so I started looking, and the process of those businesses coming up is not that quick. It's just well, actually, sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose that just turns on at random. Sometimes it's a little spurt. Sometimes it's like, you're getting flooded. And sometimes it's like just dripping for months and nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And that's super frustrating because you want to be able to control the process, and this is totally out of your control. So there was just a lot of waiting. And then when stuff would come up, I would quickly go in and dive and do some due diligence. And I'd be like, yeah, that's not really a good fit for me. No, it's not really a good market. Or no, I think they've kind of tapped that business out. Or I just can't see myself doing that. And I would have these discussions back and forth with my wife because we were going from, what was a couple grand to buy the plugins when I first got those to some serious money. We were talking a 6-figure sale. And that's a decision you don't sort of make on your own, and you don't make lightly. Yeah. So every time I would go through a business, a main question I had to ask was, is this something that I'm going to be proud to talk about with my family in general? And is this something my wife is going to be on board with? Because if I couldn't answer yes to those two questions, I couldn't do the business. And so a lot of stuff just came up, hour of due diligence.
Oh, I think I might have lost you. Let me see here. I think Dave might have just popped out. Oh, looks like you're back.
Oh, sorry, man.
Hey,
I bumped the computer. It went to sleep, and it was like, oh, bye-bye, hang out. Yeah.
So you were just talking about looking for businesses and wanting to find one that your family would really be excited about.
Right. So several came up. And so I can actually talk about these now because they are, the NDA has long since expired on this. But so the first one I actually had a chance to acquire is, you are familiar with Alan Branch and Steve Bristol's Less Accounting?
Yeah.
So they were selling that in late 2015. And that was sort of like the first serious one that I had a shot at. And I was also looking for going big. So it was something that also had to like fit into an SBA loan. And there weren't a lot of businesses that qualified for SBAs. So like getting this Venn diagram of all these various criteria in this little teeny spot.
I think I didn't qualify either for some reason. I can't remember why.
Yeah, it's super hard to get those. Like you got to find a banker that gets it, that you pass all their scrutiny on, and that there's a business that qualifies with enough history. So there's just a lot of stuff that kind of goes into that because it's very much old school money. Yeah. And they need to have that old school feel that everything's okay. So It's tough. And I was going that route initially, and I would say that was 12 months of frustration because to get a business that's SBA qualified is super hard.
Right.
But less accounting was one of them. And I was going through the process with Alan and Steve. And my wife came to me and said, you know, I don't really see you like running an accounting business. And I'm like, I can do it. I can totally get into this. I mean, they're making
Yeah.
bank. It's good. We're okay. And then we dug deeper. It was like, well, they kind of need to do a revamp. Well, I kind of don't know Ruby. Well, I kind of have to hire a Ruby developer. Oh, that really cuts into the profitability. Oh, there's a lot of work to do. Oh, well, maybe this isn't such a good thing for me after all. So the whole thing ended up not working out. But, thankfully, Steve and Alan did sell to somebody else that was a better fit than me. But that was a big letdown. That first one, I was thinking 6 months, I'm in, I'm going, I'm almost
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing falls apart. And it was like right in December when it's like getting dark here in Colorado and it's cold. And so you got the
Mm.
seasonal depression setting in. And this was right before the first Big Snow Tiny Conf. So I was kind of devastated going into Big Snow Tiny Conf because
Oh,
there was
wow.
really nothing out there at that time that I could replace that with. And so Big Snow really helped lift my spirits just to get some time with the tribe and talk to other people that were doing cool stuff and get some new direction, and that helped a lot. So I'm so glad that I had Big Snow on the books at that point,
Yeah.
because that would have been a tough winter to get through after that, because I don't think I had anything new come up until like April after that.
Hmm.
So big less accounting came on the books like in late November, and then nothing until April. Everything else was just like too small, wrong niche, not SBA, whatever. Questionable business models, lots of stuff.
Hmm.
So then something else came up in April. That didn't work out. Then later on, we had a shot at, you're familiar with Patrick McKenzie's appointment reminder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we put bids in on that too. And I was, by this time, we were a full year into it. And I'm like, I'm going to get serious. I'm not going to bullshit around with an offer. I'm going to put it over ask, because everything I had, the less accounting thing didn't work, partly because of the numbers that we were talking about, but the multiples were pretty high. And I was early on in the process, I didn't understand that SaaS was getting valued so much higher. And then they were only at like 3.4x annual revenue. And now we're like at between 4 and 5. So, I mean, they've just done nothing but bump up since then.
You're talking about the numbers that you're seeing with the, like through FEI.
Yeah. Just what things get priced at, what a business gets priced at.
Yeah.
And the prices are going up. And when prices are going up, like that really makes you super anxious when you're buying something, when you're buying a
Right.
house, when you're investing in the stock market or getting a
Right.
business, like it spurs me to action, perhaps in a possibly rash way.
Right.
So for when appointment reminder came up, I'm like, this is sweet. I know Patrick. I don't need to do a lot of due diligence. I know what he's done with this thing. I've heard him talk about it at MicroConf. I am so ready to sign the money, sign on the dotted line, shut up and take my money. And I threw in an offer, and it was like a good offer. And somebody still beat me out on that one. Like they offered even that much more, apparently,
Oh, wow.
like college tuition more for an entire 4 years, college tuition more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that was like, oh God.
Like Harvard college
I don't
tuition.
know that it was, well,
Let's get specific. No,
it's
I'm kidding.
substantial. It was definitely 5 figures, and it was not a small bump. It wasn't like a couple grand over what I was offering. It was a big bump.
Wow.
Maybe it was a
Patrick
year at
has
Harvard.
that. Patrick Patrick has that halo effect.
Yeah, he does. He does. And I mean, that was crushing too. That was brutal.
Yeah.
And that
By
really
the
took
way,
the,
I just have to mention one of the other, I was talking about the podcast I listened to. One of the other, I remember hearing, I believe it was Patrick McKenzie with Stelly from Close.io. I believe they did a podcast together and talked about selling
yeah.
and stuff. And that was a game changer for me, dude. That was, I still remember listening to that one and changing my mind. I'm going to get on the phone and really seeing a
Oh yeah.
significant spike.
Stelly
So,
is awesome. I heard him talk at MicroConf 2 years, and both times his talks were really awesome. And he's got some great stuff. So if you're out there and you've never heard of Stelly FD and you've been under some kind of a rock, he runs Close.io. Check him out. Dig up one of his talks online. And swear word alert, we actually started doing like fucks per minute when we were trying to figure out what his talk was. I don't remember what it was that he did in 45 minutes, but it was a pretty high amount. Nobody has ever touched that since. Yeah.
Solid rate.
It was totally solid. It was hilarious.
Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah. So anyway, the appointment reminder thing fell through, and this was in like late 2016, September, something like that. And I was like, all right, well, I've been doing this for a while. I know that something else is going to come. I just don't know when. And then finally in early, maybe it was mid-November again. So it was like a year after Less Accounting. Then Recapture showed up on my desk. And I was like, wow, wow, wow. I mean, it just ticked off all the right boxes. It was a good business model, solid growth potential. I looked at the code. It was well written. The guys had a good background. They had a good reason for wanting to get rid of it. They actually were running their own e-commerce store, and it was just so much bigger than Recapture over here.
Oh, wow.
And to them, it was a burden. And I'm like, I'll take that burden off your hand. That's okay.
Right.
And so I went in with a pretty clean offer, and having had all of that negotiation experience before, just immediately took it off the table. And then we closed by beginning of January, roughly.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, belated congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's funny because I believe it was Recapture. I remember I don't generally do a lot of like competitive research type of stuff. And I think that was one of the principles I remember learning from, might have been from Rob Walling or one of those podcasts of just do your thing, focus on your thing. But I remember seeing a Recapture show up in Google AdWords. I'd Google for something, email automation. And I remembered seeing them coming up, and then I checked them out, and I was like, "Oh wow, these guys look pretty good." Because at the time, Magewell was kind of in this niche where there were some one-time pay extensions, and then there was the really big email service providers, and I kind of fit in this little niche in there.
Right.
And that was the first time I saw somebody else going after that small, that same niche.
Right.
With kind of a nice finesse product. And I was like, oh man. And then I saw they were doing AdWords, and I had never messed with AdWords because it was so expensive. I mean, any kind of a Magento keyword was like, I don't know, like 10, 15 bucks a click. It's just absurd.
Oh yeah, it's higher now. It's like 17, 19, something like that. So yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. So anyway, I remember seeing that. So I'm curious, like, if that AdWords stuff worked out, and if any, I mean, if you can share it, that's fine. And also just generally, what have you been doing to kind of market, or even more generally than that, like what have you been doing to grow the business and things like that after acquiring it?
Yeah, sure. So the paid acquisition, like you said, was really rough. And I think what you basically caught was their test campaigns, testing the waters.
Okay.
And it was, they basically said to me, yeah, we tried some paid acquisition and it didn't really work. But,
I hate to say it, but that makes me a little happy to hear that.
Yeah, but, paid acquisition is a funny thing, right? It works until it doesn't, or it doesn't work until it does, because you got to kind of hit on the right thing, like the right keyword, the right creative, the right customer, the right place, the right message, the right upsell or upgrade. Like one thing I've noticed that isn't working, I think, in our space at all is to just directly pitch a trial. Like I think it's too early. They don't really know you from Adam, unless your name is MailChimp or Klaviyo or Drip or something like that. You don't have that name recognition to have somebody just jump right into that. You've got to build some trust.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what everybody tries in their paid acquisition. They're like, here, try me out. And we're like, why would I try you out? Like I see this all the time on other people's products where they're like asking me to do a trial. And I'm like, I don't know you. Why would I trust you? So I think that's a big gap. That's a big gap we have to overcome.
Yeah. I've tried paid acquisition on a few occasions. Probably over the years, probably 4 or 5. I've jumped in, thrown some dollars at. Last time around, I threw maybe 3, 4, 5,000 on a Facebook campaign. Just this week, I did some paid acquisition on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and I've since turned it all off. I was like, it's not working, and I threw up my hands yet again, which I'm kind of embarrassed. Like, there's something about it that I want to learn how to make it work. And but I don't know. I maybe I don't have the mindset for it. I'm not disciplined enough with laying out the campaigns, testing them, finding the right creative, finding the right. I twist a few
Yeah.
knobs, and then it doesn't feel like it's working. I'm like, ah,
And I think that's a super common thing about paid acquisition in general. So, Jordan Gall from Carthook, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he gave a microconf talk this year where he and his team, they're working on basically ClickFunnels for Shopify. And they've got this
Oh
product
wow.
that's outside of the Shopify store. So they get to do all kinds of things and they also get to keep all their revenue. And they did this paid acquisition where he spent like $4,000 on paid ads and turned that into 13, 14K in MRR.
What?
Yeah, and this was just Facebook. So he like walked through the whole thing of where he sort of did that. And it was kind of a trust building thing. And he did this Facebook lookalike audience. And there's this whole technique that kind of went along with it. Um, it's going to be public here pretty soon when they start publishing the microconf videos. But that, sort of made me stand up and pay attention. Like, clearly, you're just not doing paid acquisition the right way, but you have to have like that whole set of things in place. And that's what he sort of dialed in is what does that set look like? How do we get that? How do we build the whole funnel that goes along? And it turns
Right,
into a crescendo of effect. And then it wasn't until the end that he's really making the ask to get him started, but it was after he built the trust. And I
right.
think that's what paid acquisition looks like for a smaller SaaS or startup these days. You can't just go straight and say, hey, you want to get married? You got to date them first. You got to hold their hand. You got to take them to dinner.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, and it's funny because I think about ads that I've seen as a consumer, like on Facebook. I've seen there's this one guy, remember I've seen a few of his different ads, and I'm not taking any action on them. It's probably not a fit for me, but it's sort of registering in my head, and I remember him, and then I see it again and I remember him. And so as an end user, I totally get that. I totally get there's this journey, it
yeah.
takes time, you build, but then when you got your business person hat on, you're like, "Hey, I'm paying good money for these for these damn clicks
Yeah.
or views. Like if I pay 75 bucks and I get, 3,000 video views, like something should happen there, right?" And so,
Yeah. But again,
it's
if you're giving a message that's not resonating with the audience, you can get
yeah.
those 3,000 views and they're like, whatever. But if
Yeah.
you can really spur them into something, that's when action gets taken. So that's part of the whole magic, right? And
Yeah.
that's why, like, so many people have been telling me, Dave, if you can make paid acquisition work, this is like just printing money, but you gotta dial in all of these things here. And you
Right.
kind of have to turn into an expert into Facebook ads and creatives and copywriting and headlines and
Right.
content upgrades and all this other stuff to put it all together. And Jordan's really good at that. Like he is a marketer, sales guy by trade. So he's been doing that. He's the non-technical guy at Carthook. He's got a technical founder, and they do great things together because he's doing all the stuff that Ben is doing all the technical stuff, and Jordan is doing all the sales and marketing stuff, and they are firing in all cylinders. So I think you just need to,
Yeah.
spend more. But you're like a master marketer. I mean, you have this huge LinkedIn following. The Mage Talk podcast has tons of followers on it. And so I can see where that frustration would sort of surface. You're like, I can do this stuff. Why the hell is my paid acquisition not working? Like, I
Well,
think it's
yeah,
it's a whole different beast.
I think so, yeah, and I think people have different, marketing channels that they're better at or they have success in, and you kind of maybe stick with. There's maybe a tendency to stick with what's worked for you, whether that's organic or people that get good at SEO or whatever. And it probably makes it hard to take seriously and invest the time to really do paid right when you do have these other organic channels that are working well, and you're like, well, things are mostly
Yeah.
working fine, I'm making enough money. I'm like, I don't have enough motivation to really crack that nut as much as
Yeah.
I kind of want to. But anyway, so like what are some of the things you've done to kind of grow the business and market it and stuff like that?
Sure. So one of the very first things that I saw when I acquired Recapture, it was Magento only, of course, because the guys that built this were Magento. They were on Magento stores. They knew Magento really well. But it was obvious that, there's a lot of other players in the SaaS space that don't just stay on one platform at all. CardHook and those guys, they're pretty much on everything. WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Shopify, Volusion, which is where Jordan's original experience came from. So I was like, all right, we probably need to integrate into something else and open up another channel to get more customers in on that. So that's why we started doing a Shopify integration. We started it last year. I had to hire a developer. There was a whole process that went with that. I finally got a good guy. He was working on that. We got it into beta in January, February. We finally got into the App Store in Shopify in April, after some hiccups trying to get that all set up and finished up. And that is a good growth channel so far. I'm getting lots of new customers. When I was at Unite this year, I talked to a lot of different agencies, so that I could actually sort of make some connections and say, hey, this is what Recapture can do. What are your customers looking at for email marketing? Can I help them with that? Is there something I can help them optimize? Are they using these other tools? Are they liking the other tools? That sort of stuff. So you make those personal connections. It's definitely more hands-on and more intensive, but I think this has got a pretty good chance to work out there. But that's the channel growth is limited to how much time I can put into that on any given day. It's not like organic search where it's just happening in my sleep. It's me sending emails and setting up demo calls and stuff like that. But I'd say so far that's looking pretty positive. Those are the big things. I tried some paid cold acquisition last year. It wasn't really paid. I got a list of people that were on Magento stores, and I just tried the pitch to try to get them in there. I realized one thing on that one really quick. I sucked at cold email.
That's another thing too. Like cold email is an art. Like I see these emails where it's this huge wall of text, and I'm just like, ah. And then you see another email that's short and sweet, and it has a nice touch. And sometimes I'll get a cold email that I'll be like, I don't really mind that. I don't consider that spammy. Sometimes I'll even reply to it. But once they start sending multiple reminders and stuff like that, that's just
it's interesting. When I was doing the cold email stuff, it was probably like a year ago, April, and I spent like a couple of months on that. Again, it's one of those things, like I took all the best practices that I had found on the web from Sujan Patel and HubSpot and all these people that are supposedly like top of their game with cold email.
Yeah.
And the stuff just fell flat. Like I converted exactly 0 customers off of that list doing all of this stuff with multiple follow-ups. And I tried A/B testing and some other stuff like the message. I don't know if it was the message. I don't know if it was the list. I don't know if it was my timing. I don't know if it was the lack of trust. So many things factored into it, but it was like, it just wasn't working for me. So I had to shut it down. I was like spending 3 months on that. I'm like, I can't do this. I got to do something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I want to revisit because I know that it works for other people. And there was another guy that was at MicroConf this year where he talked about their campaigns. So he runs FOMO, which is a Shopify app.
Okay.
And I think that they've come over to Magento, but basically as people are buying on the store, it does a little pop-up that says, so-and-so just checked out with these items, and so-and-so, Yeah. So total GDPR violation there, but
that's another topic we got to get into.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so these guys were like, and they're making huge amount of money. They're like 100K MRR. And they did that partly through just like getting reviews in the store. They also did some Shopify integrations. And then they also did some cold emails. And they also did stuff on Capterra. And so, like there's all these channels that I'm trying to tap that I'm like, it's just, how much time do you have to work on any one channel? And I don't want to try to spread myself too thin across the channels, because then you're not really effective, right?
Yeah. Because you gotta go deep. You gotta go deeply in one or however many channels the paid thing is a great example.
Yeah.
Doing it at a service level gets you nowhere. Same with email. You got to learn how to do it right. Same with developing relationships with agencies. You got to go to that conference, right? Like, once you've gone to Imagine multiple years in a row, it's a different experience from that first year.
Sure.
So by the way, did you go to Imagine, or are you gonna get a chance to?
I still want to go to Imagine. It was funny because Imagine started to overlap with MicroConf, And so
Yeah.
I was like, well, shit, I can't, I don't want
You're
to miss
on
microconf.
yeah, you're on the
So
other side of the problem, the same problem that I have.
same problem that you had. So, but then Shopify pushed theirs like a week afterwards. And I was talking to my wife and she's like, there is no way in hell you are doing 3 weeks of conferences in a row. And I said, yes, ma'am.
Smart
So,
man.
so I had to pick which ones made the most sense, and logistically Shopify and microconf growth worked out. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool. I heard a lot of good things about the Shopify conference.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun
Um,
up in Toronto. I had a good time up there. It's a nice
nice.
bunch of folks. They had a nice venue this year. They had an old brick making. It's called the Evergreen Brickworks. So they've kind of shut it down and converted it into like a conference space. So they set up a bunch
Mm,
of chairs and they had this outdoor area, and then they had some side stages, and they had the main stage and a back area where you could talk to the QA folks. So it was cool. It was cool.
nice.
And, it was native, Shopify is based in Toronto and in San Francisco. So we were at their headquarters for some of the partner events the day before.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
that was
cool.
cool.
So you mentioned GDPR. I think I also saw you did a podcast episode on the was it the unofficial Shopify podcast
I did one with
on
Kurt.
GDPR?
Yeah, we talked about GDPR, GDPR Armageddon. What's a pirate's favorite European regulation? GDPR Armageddon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Show title.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So yeah, that's been kind of like a small nightmare. And in fact, it's funny. I got my first um, GDPR email today from somebody trying to pitch me GDPR services of apparently something that I left out of my GDPR privacy policy agreement.
Oh, that's fun. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, so I got to research this and see like how important is this to have this one thing. And of course, they're pitching their services, and I'm sure that they're come at a 5-figure price tag. So the answer is hell no. But it's something else that I probably missed in the whole thing here. But yeah, I mean, talk about, I don't know if we've ever had a law that had such broad reaching implications outside of the country where it was actually authorized and implemented.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was brutal. It was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a
Yeah.
month of lost development for recapture because we had to
Wow.
comply with it. As email marketing, like you have to dial this stuff in. Like I looked at our customer base, we had 23% EU customers,
Really?
and they were all panic emailing me back in January saying, so what are you going to do for GDPR?
Oh
Are
wow.
you going to support GDPR? One of them even said, you know what? If you can't do GDPR, I have to leave. And I'm like, okay, that's bad.
You're
Yeah.
like, we're doing GDPR.
Yeah, like I looked at the loss in revenue and I was like, this is not something I can ignore.
Yeah.
So from that perspective alone, I had to become compliant with it. But
What did you change? And it's funny because I would have been hit with all the same issues with
oh yeah,
Mage
Mage Mail
Mail.
would have the same problems.
Got out at a good time. I was just kidding.
Yeah,
But
nice, nicely done.
but what I saw it coming. I saw it around the corner with the EU.
Yeah. And it's
Actually,
coming
it's
for the
funny
US,
because
by the way. I have no
it is
doubt that it will
coming.
be. It's not a question of if, but when.
It's
So
coming. Yeah.
anybody who went to GDPR compliance basically saved themselves tons of work when it comes to the US. So
Good point. Good point.
yeah.
So what did you have to change in terms of functionality for banded card emails and things like that?
Well, so GDPR really sort of fundamentally says your users have specific rights and you have to honor those rights. It's not about your wants, it's about their rights. And so there's a little switch that you turn on inside of our dashboard that says, hey, become GDPR compliant. And then there's things that will pop up. So when they first visit the site, we have to pop up something that says, here's explicitly what we're collecting and what we're going to do with it. And they have to check to say, we're okay with that. Yeah, please send me offers and discounts and collect my email for this purpose.
Mhm.
Because if you don't do that, then you're out of compliance with GDPR. So that's kind of like the main thing is just respecting the user's wishes and privacy rights. I haven't gone back, people are talking about that their email lists are getting, murdered and stuff like that. I'm not seeing those exact things, but I haven't gone back and looked at the numbers. I mean, hell, we've only had it for 3 weeks at this point.
Mhm.
So it's hard to say how it's affecting things, but I think I think you had a lot of tire kickers in the store in the first place. Like, what abandoned cart rates are like. They're like 70% on average.
Yeah.
That's pretty brutal. So if people are abandoning and they're never going to buy in your store, the abandoned cart emails aren't going to help anyway. So if you just narrow this down to an audience of people that really care about your stuff and your product in your store,
Yeah.
you've just improved the health of your email list like massively. So in that sense, I think GDPR was a good thing and a positive thing. I think the implementation absolutely sucked ass. I think the whole thing was just a nightmare, forcing the way that it basically forced US businesses, well, any non-EU business in general, to act on this in order to make sure that any customers that come onto the platform aren't in violation of this, and that the threat that an EU entity could come after a US business is sort of bogus. And then like all of this stuff is totally untested in the courts. Nobody really knows what's enforceable, what's not. Are these clauses like overreaching? Or are they reasonable? We don't really have a sense of this yet. So you just sort of had to apply all the changes and pray. And, we put those changes in there. We added some language so that people could update their privacy policies. We notified everybody. We set it up so that people could delete data out of our system. And we set it up so that they can make, the standard GDPR requests and stuff like that. I know some people have set up their sites to basically reject all European traffic.
Right. Right.
Which I feel like is
That'll
a bit.
show them.
That'll show them. Yeah. That doesn't seem like the right approach either. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's over. I think the storm has passed, but I don't think the implications and the consequences have really hit yet, and I don't think we're going to see that for another year.
Yeah. So for something like abandoned cart, do they? I mean, has that dropped off significantly? Because essentially, the way abandoned cart worked before is they put their email in. Okay, great. Now we can email them about an abandoned cart. But now, how does that work? Do they have to see a pop up before they put their email in when they first
Yeah.
land on the site?
Yeah, they have to basically say it's okay for you to collect my email and email me about discounts, offers, abandoned carts, marketing
So there's
promotions,
a
whatever.
so a pop up comes up and it has like one because there's the cookie pop up or bars that started to
Yeah.
happen in Europe. So what's that experience like? Is there one bar or pop up and does it have multiple checkboxes on it?
Well, the way we did it, we tried to make it, everybody's like, okay, you have to have all this granular stuff in here. And then I don't know if
Yeah.
you saw like the one from not Twitter. Was it Twitter? No, it was some social marketing platform that had a dialogue that was literally as tall as your screen, lists of checkboxes, and there's no select all to take you off of those things. And they were, I mean, it was huge screw you to whoever was, setting that up.
That's so
And
funny.
no, so we didn't want to do that, but basically we wanted to make it simple. And, we're still testing the waters too. Like, we don't really know. They said you had to make it all the super granular, but other people are saying, no, you don't. Because if you have a legitimate interest in their business, like, people are like, you can't keep any personally identifiable information. Well, yeah, I can actually, because I have to process their damn direct credit card to send them the things that they're buying off my site. Like, I
Mhm.
have to have addresses. I have to have a name. I've got to have the credit card. I've got to have an email. Like, I don't need to ask their permission for that. If I don't have those, I can't do the transaction. That's dumb.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely this tension between legitimate interest and asking permission. And I think everybody like freaked out and said, you have to ask permission for everything. And I'm like, no, actually you don't. And it's over here. So we're kind of trying to balance that with like one checkbox that says, hey, here's a set of things that are totally reasonable for us to ask as an e-commerce store, because almost all e-commerce stores do this. And you've
Yeah.
probably already been doing this anyway.
Yeah.
So let's just ask permission for all these things at once. And they're all related anyway. So I didn't do like 16 checkboxes that say marketing emails, abandoned
Yeah.
cart
Yeah.
emails,
Yeah.
welcome emails, all of this stuff. I thought that was ridiculous. So
Gotcha.
will it screw up things? Will it piss somebody off? Will we get sued? Stay tuned. I have no
Who
idea.
knows? Yeah. And have you seen, like, to what extent have numbers decreased as far as the number of people you've been able to opt in to send emails to?
Oh, honestly, I haven't even looked at the stats yet. I
Okay.
haven't. Yeah. No,
you're like,
I
no, I don't want, I don't want to see it.
well, I
I don't
kind of
want to
wanted to
see the
give it like a
garbage.
month to really
Yeah,
see a full trend because week over week things can fluctuate quite a bit.
yeah,
But in a month, you kind of get a pretty solid idea of whether it's going up or it's down. And, I don't have like all of my stores. I don't even know which ones turned it on yet. I haven't gone and done a query to see have they
gotcha,
become compliant? Like, did they actually go through all of the stuff they're supposed to go through?
gotcha.
Because if they didn't do it and they're an EU thing, and I look at this, I'm like, oh, hey, look, it's all the same. Well, that's not really a legitimate data point. So I haven't done a deep data analysis. It's on my list of things to do. So
Right
I
on,
had more
right on.
important things like get in a live stream with you, man.
There you go. There you go. I appreciate it. Well, hey, this was fun, man. Anything else that we any other topics we missed that we want to hit before we wrap this up?
Oh gosh, I don't know. We talked about lots of businessing stuff. So yeah, I think we hit a lot of good things, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks for having
Awesome.
me on.
Well,
This has been super fun.
thanks. Yeah, no, this is a lot of fun. How can people find you online?
So if you're looking for abandoned cart emails and email marketing, you can hit us up at recapture.io. We do Shopify and Magento. You can find me on the Twitters at Dave Rodenbaugh. Last name is spelled Rodenbaugh. And if you're interested in attending the conference, we have slots every year. There's a dozen slots. It's bigsnowtinyconf.com. There's an East version and a West version and a European version, and all of them are linked to that main site there. And yeah, if you're into WordPress, you can probably find me in the repository there too. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in and have a good one.